Best-selling author Gayle Boss has released All Creation Waits, the Advent mystery of new beginnings for children in time for Advent, which is starting this Sunday. And it's a beautifully illustrated picture book edition of her beloved book from 2016, I believe. And in an often chaotic holiday season, children will learn from 24 woodland animals adapting to the season of dark and cold to slow down and wait with all creation. Welcome, Gayle.
Oh, thank you, Kara. What a pleasure to be here.
So I don't know if you're ready to slow down and wait with all creation, but the season is here. And before the book even begins, you instruct the reader that each page is to be read one day at a time, not to rush ahead. Can you explain your reason for this?
Yeah. I have to go back to the original book. I made the book 18 years after I made an Advent calendar for my children. And the Advent calendar featured animals behind each single door. 18 years later, I guess my brain and heart and mind were all busy doing other things. But 18 years later, I got the idea that this kind of an Advent approach to Advent might be really helpful for adults too, to focus on one woodland animal each day of Advent as a kind of guide for us for the wisdom of the season. So I wrote this book for adults that does feature one animal for each day of Advent as a symbol for what a healthy soul might do when it's facing a harsh, dark, cold season. So then when we made the children's book, in order to bring all the family members into this practice of waiting with the Advent animals, we continued that approach of one animal for each day of Advent, there to give the child, the adult, some bit of guidance on how to be really healthy in this season, not either depressed by the dark and cold or frenzied in distraction, I think, which is also a way to escape the gloom of it.
Well, and when you're reading these facts, written so lyrically, by the way, I can't help but awe at creation, the mystery and the wonder that every animal, every creation says something about God. Have you always been drawn to animals?
I have. I've always been drawn to animals from the time I was a young child. But in my 20s and 30s, I lived with my husband in Washington, D.C. for 15 years in the inner city. And so that part of me went dormant, like hibernated. It wasn't until we moved back to West Michigan, where we were both born and raised, and had children of our own. And they were so enchanted with the natural world. I found my own enchantment with animals waking back up.
Wow. I mean, this is where I feel like I am in my season too, is my kids have so much awe and wonder that I'm trying to foster that. I want to encourage that more. What do the animals in this book that you talk about, you cover, what do the animals teach us, first of all, about preparation?
Well, all of them. Thankfully, there are 24 of them, and thankfully, each of them has a different way to approach the season. So there's no formula, right? And that's the lovely thing. I think every person, every child can find a match or a fit in one of the animals for his or her personality. But all of them give us the message that because the whole natural world is slowing down and directing all of its energy sheerly to the essentials needed for survival, we can do that too. Squirrels do that in a much different way than turtles, but all of them are making certain to husband their energy just for the essentials, which they need to do to survive. And I think that's a word to us too, to take your energy and make sure that it's focused on just the essentials. The church fathers, when Advent was begun, the tradition of Advent was begun back in the 4th century, said the things to do in Advent weren't to shop and to feast and to party. It was to pray, fast, and give away, because those are human practices in concert with what the natural world is doing. Those are ways human beings also strip down to essentials. So the church fathers, the genius there is that they were nudging human beings to be in step with the natural world of which we are made, right?
Yeah. And we've kind of ignored that, right? And I think what's so good about these animals is that, okay, yes, we're referring to this winter season, but just the metaphor of waiting in these dry and dark, cold seasons, metaphorically, I think is relevant all year round. I want to talk about my favorite, and I'd love to know which one you feel like is your favorite. But for me, it was the bees. Talk about the bees briefly.
Yes, honeybees during the cold, dark season don't fly about. Wild honeybees, now we're talking about, not hived honeybees. They gather inside a hollow tree and they circle up around their queen. This is 40, 50,000 of them. And they simply shiver their flight muscles. That's all they do for 6 months, is to shiver these tiny flight muscles. One bee shivering alone doesn't make much heat, but 20, 30, 40,000 bees all shivering their flight muscles together keep the hive, which is the queen and their honey stores, at a lovely 90, 95 degrees so that she stays warm, the honey stays warm, they have their supplies together, and they all live. And then they do that, they shiver those flight muscles, and while they're doing it, because the ones on the outside of the circle, of their sphere, get cold, they then loop back into the inside, and the ones on the inside take their places and circle back out to the outside. So while they're shivering, they're doing this looping dance together. Mm-hmm. It's a beautiful picture of community. How one of them alone can't make a difference, but 20,000 shivering together and dancing together saves the hive.
And if bees can dance as they wait, so can we. And
yes.
And it was just, I think when you say take each day and just sit in that day and in that animal, there's so much reason for that, because we're thinking about how this can apply to our own lives, and there's these metaphors, and you've just done such a beautiful job. I don't know why I'm getting so moved by it. It's so good. What would you say is your match? What's the one that you would pick for you?
You know, I've been sitting with these animals like this for probably 8 years, if we talk about the writing of the book and then through the publication in 2016. And what I found is that a different one each Advent comes with a message for me. Last year, it was the Eastern firefly. I would not have guessed it, but I was on a retreat in which the retreat leader was walking us through the animals and said, one of them will speak to you. Which one will it be this year for you? And it was like I got a hand at the center of my gut, just pulling me toward the firefly. And she definitely had a message for me last year, where I was in my life, in my professional life, my family life. And I had to listen to what was a very hard message about waiting underground, hidden in a form of life that no one would recognize.
Wow. Okay, as we wrap up, obviously the intent is to point to Jesus. So with each creature, each day of Advent, children hear this refrain: the dark is not an end, it's a door. It's the way a new beginning comes. How does that all point to the birth of Christ?
Well, I think that refrain that you just recited for us is, first of all, the whole gospel. The dark was not an end for Christ. It was a door. It was the door to his resurrection and the way a new beginning came for us. And I think that's true for everything in the world. We are not, because we have this hope in Christ, the dark, any dark is not an end for us. It's a door.
All Creation Waits, the Advent Mystery of New Beginnings, the children's edition. Gayle Boss. Perfect timing. Advent starts this Sunday. Gayle, thank you so much.
What a pleasure. Thank you, Care.